In the stillness of a desert night, under a canopy of indifferent stars, a single decision can change the course of history. A whisper can become a roar that echoes for centuries. This is not the story of a battle fought at dawn, but of an empire declared in the dark. The year is 661 AD, or 41 AH in the Islamic calendar. The place, the dusty, tense streets of Damascus. The man, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, imagined the Islamic world at a crossroads. Just 3 decades after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the young community is reeling. The assassination of the third caliph, Uthman Ra, has plunged it into its first great internal conflict, the fitna. The righteous caliph Ali Ra strives to hold the Ummah together from Kufa, but challenge and chaos are everywhere. And in the powerful province of Syria, a governor waits, Muawiyah, a companion of the Prophet, a scribe of the Revelation, a man of immense political and administrative genius. For years he has ruled Syria with formidable efficiency, building a loyal army and a stable state. The murder of his kinsman Uthman Ra is not just a political crime to him, it is a deep, personal blood feud. He holds Ali Ra responsible for not bringing the assassins to justice. For months, tensions simmer. Letters are exchanged, armies muster. They meet at the Battle of Siffin, a traumatic, inconclusive clash that ends not with a victor's sword, but with the raised pages of the Quran, calling for arbitration. But the arbitration fails. The Ummah is fractured, exhausted, and in this void of authority and peace, a shocking event occurs: the assassination of Ali Ra by a Kharijite extremist. The light in Kufa is extinguished. The news travels like a desert wind to Damascus. What does Muawiyah do? Does he mourn? Does he hesitate? No. In that moment of profound uncertainty, he acts with breathtaking decisiveness. There was no grand coronation at noon, no cheering throngs filling a majestic square. It happened at night. In a gathering of his most loyal supporters, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan received the bay'ah, the oath of allegiance. He was declared the Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful. The caliphate, born in the simplicity of Medina, nurtured in the expansion of the Rashidun era, was now to be anchored in the palaces of Damascus. This was more than a transfer of power. This was a transformation. The era of the Khilafah Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs, had closed. With that nocturnal oath, Muawiyah declared the dawn of something new, something that would reshape the world, the Umayyad Empire. A betrayal of an ideal, or the inevitable birth of an imperial system. How did the son of Abu Sufyan, once a fierce opponent of Islam, become the architect of its first great dynasty? And what does this pivotal, controversial night teach us about power, faith, and the complex journey of a civilization? This is the night the caliphate became a kingdom. This is the night Muawiyah declared the dawn of a new empire. Let us step into that night. The air in Damascus is thick with rumor and opportunity. News of Ali's Ra death has just arrived. For Muawiyah, the primary obstacle to his demand for justice is gone, but nature and politics abhor a vacuum. In Kufa, Ali's son Hassan Ra is recognized as caliph, but the situation is fragile. Muawiyah knows that hesitation is defeat. He gathers his council. These are not just tribesmen, they are the seasoned generals and administrators of Syria, a well-oiled machinery of state that he built. The debate is likely short. The logic is overwhelming. Who has the army? Damascus. Who has the treasury? Damascus. Who has the stable, uncontested territory? Damascus. And who has the claim? through his demand for Uthman's justice and his own political lineage. Muawiyah, the Bay'ah is given. It is a political and military compact. With this act, Muawiyah makes a monumental shift. The caliphate is no longer to be, in theory, an elective position based on seniority and piety within the early community. It is now a seat of power, tied to a family, the Banu Umayyah, and secured by military strength and political acumen. Muawiyah does not celebrate, he moves. He sends a letter to Hassan ibn Ali Ra in Kufa, not with threats first, but with an offer. Relinquish your claim, avoid more bloodshed among Muslims, and you will be granted safety, honor, and a generous stipend. Muawiyah, the politician, is at work. He understands the power of diplomacy alongside the sword. Hassan Ra, a man of peace who witnessed the horrors of fitna, makes a painful, wise, and profoundly consequential decision. He accepts the terms, in what historians call the Year of Unity. Hassan Ra steps aside. Muawiyah enters Kufa, and for the first time in years, the entire Muslim world acknowledges a single caliph. And so the Umayyad Empire begins. Muawiyah transforms the caliphate's structure. He establishes the Diwan al-Qatam, the chancery, to officialize correspondence. He solidifies the postal and intelligence system, Barid. He moves the capital from the symbolic heartland of Arabia to the ancient, strategic hub of Damascus, a move that turns the Islamic State outward, towards Byzantium, North Africa, and Central Asia. He introduces the concept of hereditary succession, naming his son Yazid as his heir, a decision that would later spark tragedy at Karbala, but which cemented the dynastic principle. Under his rule, the empire pushes west to the Atlas Mountains and east to the borders of India. He builds the first Islamic navy, challenging Byzantine mastery of the Mediterranean and laying siege to Constantinople itself. This is the central paradox of Muawiyah. He was a Sahabi companion, yet he founded a dynastic kingship mulk. He stabilized and expanded the empire with brilliant statecraft, yet his methods prioritizing realpolitik over the consensual model of the early caliphs drew criticism from many scholars of his time. And after, he is remembered in history as both a pivotal leader who united and strengthened the Ummah, and as the man who changed the nature of its rule forever. The night of his declaration was not marked by prophetic simplicity, but by imperial necessity. It was the moment the Islamic polity came of age, grappling with the immense, messy responsibilities of governing a superpower. The dawn, Muawiyah declared, was not the pure dawn of Medina, but the brilliant, complex, and sometimes harsh sunrise of a world empire. The story of Muawiyah's rise is not just a political chronicle. It is a repository of profound Islamic lessons. It forces us to grapple with complex questions about power, justice, and the sometimes painful gap between ideal and reality in human governance. First, the pursuit of unity, J.M.A. Macron Letter 2, BFAH. After years of crippling civil war, Muawiyah's paramount achievement was unifying the Muslim world. The Prophet P. Bus said, "The hand of Allah is with the Jama'ah community." Tirmidhi. Muawiyah and Hassan Ra, in their agreement, prioritized collective peace over individual right or continued conflict. This teaches a brutal but necessary lesson. Sometimes, preserving the community's stability, even under an imperfect ruler, is a greater immediate good than perpetual strife for an ideal. It is the wisdom of choosing the lesser of two harms. Second, the dangers of unchecked partisanship, Letter 2, B, F, I, Letter 1, E6, 3, A, B, I, Y, Y, I, H. The fitna that preceded Muawiyah's rule was fueled by tribal loyalties and personal vendettas disguised as righteousness. The Quran warns, "And obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not dispute, and thus lose courage, and then your strength would depart." Quran 8:46. The tragedy of that era shows how quickly religious zeal can be hijacked by worldly passions, be it the desire for vengeance, power, or tribal supremacy. It is a timeless warning for our own communities today, where slogans can mask old hatreds. Third, Justice Adil vs. Order and a letter 1, E9, 3m. Muawiyah's core claim was justice for Uthman Ra, yet to achieve order, he made compromises. Islamic ethics demand both, but history often presents a dilemma. Can perfect justice be achieved without a framework of stable order? Muawiyah chose to establish order first, believing it to be the foundation upon which justice could later be built. This raises a critical question for all of us. How do we balance our uncompromising ideals with the practical necessities of running a society? The scholars of Islam have long debated Muawiyah's legacy. They acknowledge his companionship with the Prophet P. Ba, his strength as a leader, and the blessings of expansion under his rule. Yet they critically note his deviations from the prophetic model of rule. The great scholar Ibn Khaldun would later analyze this as the natural transition from the religious impulse to the dynastic state, a cycle in history. The most poignant lesson comes from the Islamic principle of nuance. We are taught not to view historical figures as mere heroes or villains. Muawiyah was not a saintly caliph like Abu Bakr Ra, nor was he a tyrant. He was an immensely capable, complex ruler whose actions had both luminous and dark consequences. We can respect his achievements for the Ummah while critically examining his methods. This balanced approach is our intellectual and ethical duty. For us today, in a world of polarized narratives, the story teaches us to seek wisdom, not just ammunition, to understand context, not just to judge, to value unity while never silencing the voice of truth. The night in Damascus reminds us that building and sustaining a civilization requires not only purity of heart, but also wisdom in action, a wisdom that must constantly navigate between the divine ideal and human reality. That night in Damascus was not an end. It was a beginning. The empire Muawiyah forged became the trunk from which mighty branches grew. The Umayyads gave us the architectural wonder of the Dome of the Rock. Their descendants in Cordoba would later build the luminous civilization of Al-Andalus. Their administrative framework allowed the Abbasids to usher in the golden age of science and philosophy. The Ottoman sultans would trace their imperial logic back to this transformation. The dawn Muawiyah declared was the dawn of Islamic civilization as a global, enduring force. It was the start of a story that would give the world algebra and algorithms, universities and hospitals, poetic forms like the ghazal, and architectural marvels that still take our breath away. It was the beginning of a 600-year conversation between faith and empire, spirit and power. So, what do we take from this distant night? We take a legacy of responsibility. History is not a fairy tale. It is a complex tapestry woven by human beings with strengths and flaws, making difficult choices in impossible circumstances. The story of Muawiyah invites us to move beyond simplistic glorification or condemnation. It calls us to mature reflection. It inspires faith not in the perfection of Muslim rulers, but in the enduring resilience of the Islamic message, which can navigate the turbulent seas of history and still guide generations. It inspires knowledge, a thirst to understand our past in all its textured reality, not to feel superior, but to become wiser. Let this story be a mirror. When we see conflict in our own communities, remember Sifan. When we face impossible choices between ideals and practical good, remember Hassan's raw peace. When we witness the concentration of power, remember the transformation that began that night. The empires rose and fell. The Umayyads gave way to the Abbasids, the Seljuks, the Ottomans. Each learned, each contributed, and each eventually declined, teaching us the ultimate lesson. All earthly power is transient. To Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. Quran 3, 189. What remains are the deeds, the knowledge, the beauty, and the faith they carried. The true dawn is not of an empire, but of the continuous struggle to align our worldly endeavors with eternal principles. That struggle began with the Prophet Piba, continued through the trials of the Rashidun and Umayyads, and now rests on our shoulders. So, let us be inspired by the totality of our history, the luminous and the shadowed. Let it fuel not just pride, but humility, wisdom, and a renewed commitment to build, in our own time, communities that reflect justice, knowledge, and unity.